first, winners might be grinners, but the Rand government, now securely back in office, probably shouldn't be showing too much glee as more and more voters voice their disapproval over our March 20 election. The questions being raised are not just about Labor's dirty tricks, but whether the electoral process itself is flawed. So has democracy in this state been shortchanged? Well, we're about to find out, as a revolt from the grassroots is set to challenge the election outcome on a number of fronts. Graham Archer has our report.
No, Rand government, we won't accept that. We want democracy.
A dirty election, a disgusting election.
And we haven't got democracy at the moment, and we've got to make sure we get it.
This was a black day for democracy in South Australia. It must never happen again.
They say politics is the art of the possible, but perhaps we should make that the art of what it's possible to get away with.
Is it a moral tactic? Look, I think when it comes to electing governments, the important thing is whether a government will do the right thing by the people of South Australia, and I think you'll find that the Rand government is a government like that. Is that yes or no? Look, again, these are questions that are best answered by philosophers, not by party officials.
This is Michael Brown. He's the mind behind numerous dirty Labor tactics in this election, including the phony family first stunt. He's the future face of politics, free of any philosophising about ethics.
As the Act stands, there's nothing wrong with what we did.
It's all well and good for people like Michael Brown to say that's politics, but the fact is that's not politics.
And what we got this week from the Rand government was more spin.
Old-fashioned perhaps, but history is full of lessons which stem from the big folks treating the little folks like fools.
I want the winners to win because they were the most supported candidate, not because they rigged or played a game with something as important as democracy.
And one of those lessons is that from small things, big things tend to grow.
I don't care what the outcome of an election is. I'm only a small player. If I don't get coverage, people don't know I exist, obviously I won't win. I want to lose fairly. If I could lose fairly, fine.
It's a novel idea, but being a small player might be the exact qualification independent candidate Mark Aldridge needs to be an unlikely champion.
Pick something out. You got something?
He and his wife Helen take in abandoned creatures, the lame and the lost, which seems strangely fitting given the abuses of process now emerging from the March 20th election.
We've got nursing homes and hospitals that didn't have people attend to support them for their vote. We've had people that turn up to vote that weren't allowed to vote. We have had, it must be hundreds by now already that I've heard of personally, that turned up that were no longer on the roll, even though they've been on the roll for years and years. We've had ballot papers not turning up for the postal votes, so we don't know how many people missed out on casting a vote.
Mark's personal politics are not the issue here. He once ran for One Nation, something he now regrets. But it's his interest in the health of the electoral system which appears to have made him something of a rallying point.
I had a website that I put up a few years ago, which is called How to Vote in SA. And that's been quite stagnant. It's a very unprofessional site. But just before the election on the Friday and the Saturday, nearly 30,000 hits on that site.
And it's the cynical way elements of the Rand camp have exploited that ignorance that has enraged the electorate.
But you cannot impersonate or pass off how to vote cards and dress up in other political parties' colours.
It's an even more bitter pill given at the centre of this election was the question of trust. Not that that precious platform was the idea of Mike Rann or Isabel Redmond.
I mean, it's a huge factor. It's a factor of trust, it's a factor of morals, it's a factor...
It emerged from the electorate itself. The Premier's flirty relationship with a married woman behind her husband's back became symbolic of the Rand government's self-serving, dismissive attitude picked up by their constituents. But it was the gushing pledges in response.
I hope that people will trust me.
The core value of trust.
Trust us, trust me, trust.
That made the dirty tactics leading up to and on polling day so much more of a slap in the face to the electorate.
What happened on the 20th of March is a stain on democracy in this state, and it has to be fixed up.
It's part of the reason why voters have turned away from the party machines towards independents like Nick Xenophon.
I can't prove what the Premier knew or didn't know, but you would have thought the Premier, with his constant communications with party headquarters on a daily, twice daily, thrice daily basis, should have known about this.
Whatever the case, there now appears to be something much bigger at stake.
Even though the system fails us when it's operating properly, it has very much failed us now.
Dirty tricks aside, since March 20th, there've been an avalanche of complaints about the way the election itself was organised.
The things we're hearing here are amazing. There's people that were asked to vote under somebody else's name and they had the wrong name ticked off. Other people refused to do that and walked away.
We shouldn't have our electoral system, our voting process tainted by this. The fact is, we have a tainted result as a result of what occurred.
We can't really blame the Electoral Commission, effectively a government department, which appears to have been given limited time and resources to work with.
A lot of those people have got back in touch with me and said, look, hang on, I turned up, there was no ballot paper. I was turned up, they wouldn't let me vote. I've had people ring up and say they weren't allowed to enter the polling booth by how they were dressed.
The creeping contempt our political operatives have shown towards the public now appears to have infected our most basic right, a fair and honest vote. While spending millions on self-promoting ads, we seem to have got discount democracy.
When you arrived at the polling booth, you didn't have how to vote cards in your cubicles. That has been done every year. We didn't receive a how to vote guide. So this whole rort of Labor putting out these fake family first how to vote cards would have been caught out, but the public just didn't have that backup support from the Electoral Commissioner.
The priorities seem all wrong, and while the opposition scratches its chin, Mark Aldridge believes he now has sufficient grounds to go to the Court of Disputed Returns and challenge the outcome of the election.
The consequence would the election results would be voided, would become invalid.
So back to the polls.
Be back to the polls.
It's a long shot, but shows how strongly people feel. Nick Xenophon is calling for an inquiry and electoral reform.
Well, there are parts of this election that were pretty rotten, and that's why we need to change the law to make sure this never happens again, and those responsible for doing anything rotten ought to be held to account.
The belated promises from the Premier, now safely in office, have a hollow ring. While his dirty tricksters do high fives in the back room, and the likes of Michael Brown rub their hands at the prospect of the big leather chairs that are seen as their dues. The rest of us, it seems, have been left in a sorry state.
This sort of thing has made South Australia a national laughingstock, and we need to fix it.
We've got 4 more years of a government, all right, that may not have been chosen correctly and played dirty, underhanded stunts to get there, and that is embarrassing for us all.